Live from Kyiv is Olena Chekryzhova, a volunteer English teacher. Thank you so much for joining us. What are your thoughts heading up to this anniversary on Friday?
Well, the date is approaching, and I think that now each Ukrainian is reconsidering the experiences of this war, because this day definitely divided our lives into before and after the war. This year was extremely hard for all Ukrainians, and especially the last several months, because we had to survive without electricity, without heating, running water, under constant attacks, rocket strikes and drone attacks. But against all odds, we have gone through this. And nevertheless, this experience boosted our unity and helped us to be more stress resilient, more consolidated, and I think more adaptive. Honestly, Ukrainians now are more realistic about the end of this war. We understand that there is no sight of the end of it. So we are preparing for different scenarios, different ways, and I think that this year taught us a lot in terms of our national identity and in terms of our Ukrainian unity.
And Olena, what does sustain Ukrainians when they are looking ahead and don't see an end in sight in the immediate term? And when civilians and citizens are discussing possible ways this war might end, what do you hear them talking about?
We understand that, we know that we're not going to surrender, that we are going to continue our fight for our independence and our freedom. But it is clear that the enemy outnumbers our armed forces, that Russian troops have the advantage in terms of their personnel, ammunition, equipment. That is why it's clear that we are not going to win the war without support. That is why this visit of US President Joe Biden to Poland to mark the anniversary of this brutal and unprovoked invasion seems to be a very positive and reassuring sign for Ukrainians, as we hope that the US and other nations, other allies will stand with us, will stand with Ukraine as long as it takes.
Bakhmut, very much on the front lines of that conflict currently. Your grandmother's from there, isn't she? And you're currently looking after her.
Well, I come from Bakhmut. It's my hometown, and my family lived there for many years. All generations had their family homes there. And unfortunately, my relatives were forced to leave their homes in Bakhmut, and now they are internally displaced as millions of Ukrainian citizens. And yes, unfortunately, every day we are observing how our towns are being ruined and virtually erased. That's why it's a very, on one hand, very tragic story, which is familiar to almost each Ukrainian.
And Olena, what would your message be to states that have elected to stay neutral in this, or those that would promulgate a narrative that they don't want to add to the fighting and help Ukrainians and Russians kill each other, when we know, looking at all the facts on the ground, that is just patently not the case? Obviously, Russia is invading a sovereign nation, but what would your message be to those countries that haven't declared support for Ukraine and aren't actively trying to help?
I think that this war has definitely sharpened and outlined the differences between Russians and Ukrainians. And now it's obvious who is who and who is fighting for what. Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and for their independence, for their sovereignty. And now they're actually the guard of the Europe, because all those crimes and all those war crimes, those atrocities are happening right at the doorstep of Europe. That's why I think the US has the key role in creating this coalition, in assisting Ukraine and providing help to Ukraine in all possible ways. I think that the democratic countries should create a coalition to support us diplomatically, militarily, legally, economically, that they should maintain sanctions against Russia, that they should continue regular shipments of military hardware, equipment, newest weapons, modern battle tanks and aircraft. And not only should they arm Ukraine, but also train Ukrainian troops. This will allow our armed forces to push the invaders back, to regain and to reclaim the occupied lands, to maintain our territorial integrity, to keep our freedom and our independence, and eventually to become a new powerful member of the Western society.
Olena Chekryzhova, thank you so much for joining us from Kyiv with your story there.
Just ahead.